Hello witches, and welcome back to Activist Twitch, where we discuss witchcraft and activism. You can call me Isha, my pronouns are she, they, and in this video we're going to explore the folkloric tradition of the UK and Italy for the month of July 2025. We're going to go into the pagan festivals, into the traditions that are here in the British Isles, and in the traditions of my home country of Italy. But before we get started, let me remind you that I've opened a Ko-fi, and it's basically an alternative to Patreon that takes less from creators. So if you like what I do here, you can support me directly there. You can do a one-off donation, you can do a monthly recurring donation, or you can get a tarot reading with me Italian style, and the low-income option starts at £5. My profits from tarot reading go back to the community, and at the moment they go split between Kuchis to Gaza, who supports Palestinian refugees in Cairo, and the Good Law Project, who is trying to bring back trans rights to the UK. So hey, if you'd like to support me there, thank you so very much. July is hot. What I find the funniest is that according to the British Almanac, which is where we go first, it's, it's to us in the British Isle, it's a nice warm thing. It was much worse in the Mediterranean, and I'm like, yes, I know, because they mention it very much in the Almanac. The first thing that the British Almanac mentions is how terrible and dreaded July was, mentioned even in the Iliad. Yeah, in the Iliad, and there is an overlap, as much as it's with different kind of folkloric stories, about the fact that really the main thing about July is Sirius, the star Sirius. Sirius is part of the constellation of the dog, and the name Sirius actually from Greek meant scorching hot, possibly because Sirius is one of the brightest stars in the sky to the naked eye even, and during July the sun and Sirius are conjunct. So the idea that both the sun being so hot and Sirius being so bright and hot, rising and setting at the same time, it's one of the reasons why you don't necessarily see Sirius, but they knew astrologically. And so these are called, in the UK, the dog days. The dog days are over. They are supposed to be very, very hot days. And that's why, because Sirius and the sun conjunct in July, at the time, like they rise and set at the same time, so the dog days are very, very, very hot days, which I like to find out. Like there's a point about it even in the Italian Almanac, so I think it was nice to find out that. Yeah, I like this bit that says, oh, while the dog days were a positive into the chilly British Isles, in the Mediterranean they were dreaded. And oh goodness me, if we're gonna go in the Italian Almanac to show you how dreaded the dog days were, like the time of July, and then that goes into August. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First of all, moons. We're gonna be in crescent moon up until the 9th of July, because we're gonna have the full moon in Capricorn on the 10th of July. It's gonna be on the 10th of July at like 9:30 in the evening, so really, you can do whatever kind of working that you want to do with this full moon in Capricorn on the evening of the 10th of July itself. Sometimes, when the full moon happens at like 2 in the morning, I usually tell you, do it the day before, like it's still growing there. But in this case, I would suggest the 10th of July itself. Capricorn is an earth sign, so ironically, anything that has to do with grounding. Let's take a look, actually. So for the moon in Capricorn, we have all those matters that have to do with motivation, determination, career, achievement, tradition, and ambition. Despite the fact that the moon is, very emotional, is connected to Mondays and psychic activity, Capricorn, very, very grounded. So it might actually repress a bit of emotion. So when you need to be very analytical, thinking, practical, full moon in Capricorn might be something that you want to work with. I like the way that Capricorn is seen as very practical and very not fussy. So whatever you have on hand, you use. You don't need extra stuff. You don't need to think this too hard. Whatever is more urgent and present in your life now on a practical level that needs working, use this full moon for that. The Capricorn full moon that occurs during Cancer season, which is very interesting, like they oppose Cancer is ruled by the moon, so it's all about emotion. Capricorn is like, no, let's repress emotion. So that's why I'm like, the full moon of Capricorn being in Cancer season feels like it brings a grounding energy that in Cancer season otherwise we don't necessarily have. Capricorn is very achievement focused, so that's why I'm like, if you have a goal in mind that maybe you're already working towards, but you want to do an extra bit of magic about that, let's light a candle about that on the full moon day. Write your desire on a piece of paper, burn it on this candle, usually a brown or green candle because it's earth. It could be something. It's very also low effort and energy. Candle, piece of paper, burn it, moon. If you feel like supporting this, that'd be nice. I'm just gonna read you this so that we go more specific. Capricorn Moon Magic. This is a time to cast a spell for long-term goals, ambition and achievement. Energy cast now can grant the endurance and stamina to climb any mountain, regardless of the incline or the length of the journey. It can also be a good time to work magic on business, money, and working within structures, or even just adding structure to your life. The autistic in me is very happy about that. Like, yes, routine. Let me clarify my routines because everything has gone a bit fuzzy in the last few months. This can include moon magic that deals with organizations, especially those with defined power structures. It makes me think of the Hierophant. Family structures fall into this category too. The Capricorn moon finds comfort in traditions, so try incorporating traditions into your moon rituals. Continue to be practical and consider spell work that uses materials you already have on hand. Follow up spells with thoughtful everyday actions to affirm the energy you are casting. Since Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, you may also consider incorporating structural elements such as pyramid shapes and timing your Capricorn moon spells. So timing it in like do your spell on the 10th on the hour of Saturn. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I've made a video about what apps I use, and most of that is about apps that tell me the planetary hour. That changes for every place that you are on Earth. On the top of my head here, because the 10th of July is going to be a Thursday, your Saturn hour here in Wales is going to be between 1 and half 2 p.m. and also in the evening between 10 and 10:45 p.m. I've made a video about planetary hours. Yes, they don't last an hour, they last more or less, unless we are talking about the equinoxes. I've made a video about it. It's nice. I love planetary magic and hours, so I'll send you to that. But yes, that's the first part of our moons, and we have this full moon in Capricorn. Then we go into waning moon up until the 23rd of July. I mentioned it before, when the moon grows, you do stuff to attract things to you so that they can grow. When the moon wanes, you do magic works for anything that you want to push away from you. And then the best time to work with that is the balsamic moon, so technically the 23rd itself, just before it gets into new moon. So it's that last sliver of the moon that, along with its disappearance, makes disappear whatever you want to make a spell for banishment, for protection. The new moon is in the sign of Leo. New moons and the sun align, so the sun has entered Leo at that point on the 22nd of July, and therefore this new moon is in Leo. Leo is an intense sign. It's ruled by the sun as well, and it's all about identity, ego to a degree. It's about personal empowerment and personal realization. There are good and bad ways to make that manifest. It can become egotistical, and or it can become manifest the best side of yourself. I have a very nice experience, thankfully, with Leo in a sense close to me, because Raven's moon is in Leo, and I can tell that having the moon rather than the sun in Leo means that all the work they like to do, everything that has to do with their identity, is to try to make themselves better, is for that to align to their own moral and ethical standard, which I think connects them to the moon and to the emotions. So having the emotional side of the moon in Leo can bring very good things. It has usually to do with self-improvement and having that kind of interest to grow and compassion to understand what you do good, and not just having that kind of constant telling yourself off because you could do better. No, you're doing well enough, and step by step we get better. Let's see what the books say about doing magic for Moon in Leo. When the moon is in Leo, creativity, expression, romance and playfulness permeate the air and your art. Ruled by the sun, Leo is about self-expression, talents, and sharing your warmth with others, the inner light that everyone has radiating from the inside out. Leo is also a sign of leadership and warmth ruling the art. The Leo new moon during Leo season, July 23rd, August 22nd, strengthens new beginnings in all Leo-favored endeavors. Embrace a new sense of confidence, explore talents and other creative endeavors, or practice expressing yourself and sharing your warmth with the world. Now, despite the fact that you might not necessarily have a moon Leo placement like my first-hand personal experience with Raven, considering that it's a new moon, so new moon, you plant the seeds for something to then grow. As technically a full-time artist, the new moon in Leo is definitely something where I would do some kind of working to try and work with my creativity and find the best way to convey my creativity into art that then can quite literally let the sun shine on me and for other people to see my work and to learn about me. There's a thing about popularity in a way. The personal working that would come to mind, again, being the kind of artist that I am, would be how do I best convey my creativity in a medium that speaks and is understood by a larger amount of people than just my brain. So that's the kind of working that I would think about for a new moon in Leo. Sunset and sunrise are starting to reduce our days. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we have gone through the summer solstice, so now in July, days are starting slowly to get shorter. So sunrise on the 1st of July was at 4:30 in general in the UK. Actually, in Morecambe, Lancashire. Interesting. Yeah, fair enough. And by the 31st of July, it's going to be at 5:30, so we lose an hour in the morning of light. Thank goodness, because honestly, having 4 hours of night, actual darkness, it's hard. It feels like you can never quite sleep and you always have to do, which I think is why the summer burns me out here. I mean, the heat also doesn't help, but yeah. And sunset on the 1st of July was around 20 to 10, something like that. But by the end of July, by the 31st, it's going to be at 9. So we're going to lose half an hour, 40 minutes of light. So slowly but certainly, days are starting to reduce. I absolutely love the story of the constellation for the month of July. So I don't always go into it, according to the Almanac. This we're going to go into it. So the star story of the month is about the constellation of Corvus, which I might be partial because, again, Raven. But here's the thing. The story of the constellation of Corvus is considered from the Welsh point of view even better. So despite the story of related to the constellation that comes from the Greek and the idea that corvids bring messages of death and the underworld and all of that, there's the legend of the Welsh that we have here, that Bran the Blessed was this giant that married his sister Branwen to the King of Ireland. But the King of Ireland was treating her very, very poorly, so she manages to actually teach to, I think, a raven to fly over from Ireland to Wales to tell her brother Bran, oh, please come save me. Bran goes and saves her and saves the day, but actually is hit by a poisonous arrow in the heel. Sounds a bit similar to the Iliad. And anyway, seems that has no connection, but once Bran is about to die, he asks his people to cut his head and, get this, bury the head on White Hill, which has now become and has been built upon the Tower of London. The head needs to look towards France, so they will always prevent invasions. And because Bran means raven, that is actually the reason why in the Tower of London you have the ravens that cannot fly away. And if they fly away, the country will fall. And that's why it's based on this Welsh legend of Bran and Bran's head, Bran means raven, being buried under the Tower of London on White Hill, looking towards France. And so if the ravens leave, if Bran leaves, then therefore the country will fall. And that's why to this day, in the Tower of London, we still have the tradition that we need to have the ravens there. Aha. The sea is at 15 degrees in Clanelly. Like, I feel like I need to go and put my feet in the sea at this point. We talked about it before. We have tides that go spring and then go neap. The neap tides are chill. The spring tides are the ones with the most difference of height. And usually they align with the new moon and the full moon, because pulling planets stuff. I'll put a picture. That is all for the British Almanac. Let's go to Italy. Actually, genuine advice here. Never, ever, ever plan your trip to Italy during the summer months. Italy is openly declared at risk of desertification at this point, and there are projections that by 2100, which is in less than 80 years now, the desertification of the Sahara will come up to the Po Valley. It's actually dangerous. There have been temperatures over 40 degrees in Italy recorded in June. Please be careful. Like, I don't think that people think about that much, and that's relatively a new thing. I don't want to play the game of in my day, but in my day, in the 90s, Italy was not this hot. I have gone back to Italy in the summer in the last 10 years, and it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me, honestly. And also the infrastructure has not caught up yet to this kind of heat. So it's not like everywhere is necessarily air conditioning. It's, please be careful. By the way, Overly Sarcastic Production has just made a video about them going to Italy. And they went to Padua, Venice, Florence, and Red had never been to Europe before. They have some beautiful reflections on the structural, cultural differences of having the kind of history that the US has, which is, a young country. It has existed as it is for 250 years. And a place like Europe, and specifically Italy, that wherever you throw a stone, there's something that is 1,000 years old. Beautiful reflections. Go take a look, and if you can't go physically, that sort of gives you the feeling of going around Italy anyways. I was born and bred there, and that made me feel like I was back there. So I'll just leave a link down in the description below. Italy is hot in July, and all the traditions that we have are about how to survive the heat. That's the short version of it. There are charms against getting angry. There was this legend that if you saw straw in a field, but it actually wasn't like wrapped up in a ball, then you would have got angry or mad. I think the realistic connection there is that when you're out and about in Italy during the day in July, you're at risk of heat stroke. You've always been at risk of heat stroke, and that could get you irritated and frustrated and therefore angry. And if the straw is already in balls, it's because it's later than July, and therefore it's not as hot, and so you might not get as frustrated, heat stroked and angry. The maximum heat in Italy was considered to happen between mid-July and mid-August, and it's considered Due Madonne, because on the 16th of July you have the Madonna del Carmelo, and then on the 15th of August you have the Madonna Assumption. Ferragosto for us is the celebration of Mary being ascended to heaven, body and spirit. That's the 15th of August. It's another celebration still of Mary, Madonna del Carmelo, on the 16th of July. Between those two, 16th of July and 15th of August, hottest time of the year. There are names for the periods of heat. There's the fire of Santa Marina, which is the 18th of July. There's the SolLeone, which is literally, the translation is the Leo sun, which is the sun during Leo season, which is considered so super heated. And there's the Canicola. Okay, Canicola goes back to Sirius. Here we go. Change of battery. The Canicola was the Roman name given to the SolLeone, so to the time of the sun in Leo. It was called Canicola because cane in Italian means dog. So for the same reason why it's the dog days in the UK, it referred to Sirius and the fact that Sirius would rise and set with the sun, and so those were the name of our dog days in Italy, the Canicola. The Canicola actually was slightly moved. I don't know if it's because it was still the Julian calendar, but the Canicola was officially between the 24th of July and the 26th of August. And interestingly, what he mentions here is that the presence of the Canicola and Sirius rising and setting with the sun was the sign for ancient Egyptian to know that the Nile was about to flood. And the Nile floods, I don't know if you know, they were very important, is how you got the limo to fertilize the area around the Nile, and it's why agriculture was so amazing and so important in Egypt, especially in ancient times. So yeah, the presence of Sirius and the Canicola was the sign of, oh, it's about the time when the Nile is going to flood, and that's a good thing. Sirius, therefore, was considered the guard dog that let Egyptian knew. I wonder if that... Well, no, it's also because it's in the constellation of the dog, but you know. The interesting thing is that the connotation related to dogs remained with two saints. One is San Cristoforo Cinocefalo, which literally means with a dog head, which... Sorry, the fact that we have saints that are supposed in some form to have animal heads really sends me back to the gods of ancient Egypt. No? Just me? Okay. San Cristoforo Cinocefalo is the 25th of July. And then we have San Rocco on the 16th of August and San Guinefort, which is a levrier? What's a levrier? A greyhound. Yeah, San Guinefort has a greyhound head. And that is being canonized and syncretized with an other saint that was actually born and then martyrized in Milan. But I think it's interesting that, like, I didn't know that there were saints that technically in some forms were considered with animal heads, because it's slightly paganish in it. The other saints that in Italy we like during the time of July are actually saints that are related to rains, because, again, July being so hot in Italy, there was this need and hope for rain to come to sort of chill a bit. So the first point is the 20th of July. There used to be Saint Margaret, Santa Margherita. I think she's been replaced by San Elias, as in the prophet. But Saint Margarita was the 20th of July. And she was a martyr at 15 years old. And supposedly she was martyrized in the 3rd century current era, and hers was one of the voices that Joan of Arc heard 1,000 years later. I think it's, interesting to know. Margherita was supposedly eaten by a dragon, but she had a sword, and so she opened the dragon and just got out. She is supposed to be connected to water, I think mainly because her feast day was in July, and at a time when the 20th of July is still Cancer season. The reason why she's being replaced by Saint Elias, I'm not exactly sure, but he also has this connection to water and is considered a saint that you pray to when you hope for rain. So we start off, especially in Veneto, so the northeast side, there's a charm literally asking Sant'Elia to make it rain. On the 22nd of July, we have the Tears of Magdalene, the Lacrime della Maddalena. Same thing, we hope that on the 22nd of July it rains, and when it rains, it's supposed to be a very nice drizzling rain, which are supposed to represent the tears of Mary Magdalene. It's also the 22nd of July, a very good day to do anything that is a balm, an oil, a cream, a salve, because apparently Mary Magdalene was very good at that, and that being her feast day means that any kind of salve or oil that you do at that day will work well. Interestingly, related to St. Mandalek, there's also the Lavender Bath, which, we know that lavender is a good herb, we like it, it's perfumed, it's supposed to purify. Italy thinks so as well. Supposedly, especially in Tuscany, you would boil lavender on the day of Magdalene and then use the water to bathe children if you worried that children had the malocchio. So you put them, I think, in a basin with the water. If the water gets cloudy, then it has retained the curse. And if actually you put the child in and the child comes out and the water is still clean, no, the child still has the curse. Which is also the reason why having like small bundles of lavender was considered against anything evil, anything bad. And admittedly, we still have lavender even here in the UK, like having the bundle of lavender upside down. Not even upside down, but I literally have it here on my Venus altar. I have dried lavender. It's just a nice thing to have, really. On the 26th of July, I think it's Sant'Anna. Sant'Anna is the mother of Mary, and usually is celebrated when you want help during childbirth. There are also comparisons that have been made about the idea of Sant'Anna and Saint Mary, that is the daughter, and then Saint Mary being the daughter giving birth to Christ. There are overlaps, they say, to the Maiden Mother Crown. I don't see it. I'd like not to see it, but maybe because I don't like the Maiden Mother Crown. But that's something that is mentioned here. And interestingly, it's still related to water, but not in a good way. On Sant'Anna, on this 26th of July, you need to be careful about water. Like, there's the superstition of you don't go in the sea because you might drown, because the water will inganna. Sant'Anna il mare inganna. The water will fool you, and not in a good way. But it is also a day where rain is expected to happen, so, you know, look up for the water, but don't go in the water. That is pretty much it for the almanac. I will cover, although, the 1st of August, because usually these videos come out after the month has begun. And it's just interesting because it mentions and explains the difference between the Sabbath that we call Lughnasad or Lammas. Lughnasad is the Celtic name, and it was the 40 days after the summer solstice to celebrate Lugh and his mother Taltu, which I didn't know about that bit. And the issue of calling it Lammas is that it's a Christianization, so as Christianity does, cannibalize, take it. Oh, very nice God you have there. Would be a shame if you became a saint. And indeed, Lughnasad has become Lammas in the Christian version of it, which is the mass of the bread. So it has to do with the fact that at this point you have harvested the grains, and so you start to make the fresh bread. Christians have decided that because Lu was the bread and his mother, Tailitu, was considered the earth. No, we have turned it around, and actually, guess what? The bread, the Eucharistic bread, is Jesus, and therefore the field, the earth, the spring of wheat is actually Mary, so we have overwritten it, and so instead of Lughnasad now is Lammas, which is the reason why, if we have to call it, it might be nicer to call it Lughnasad, even if it's bit more difficult to spell. I didn't know the difference, to be honest. I knew that they were both names, I didn't know why. This just taught me why. And so, because it's one of the ways in which Christianity tries to overwrite things, we don't like that. We like to cite the sources and know where things come from, not whoever appropriates it. So Lughnasad is more ideal. It is usually one of those bonfire kind of Sabbats. Kind of makes sense, it sort of mirrors Beltane, but it also in a way mirrors Imbolc because it's the first Sabbath after the solstice of summer, whilst Imbolc is the first Sabbath after the solstice of the winter. And as much as in the winter it's still cold, Imbolc is when you're expected to see the first snowdrops, so you start to celebrate Brigid, Vesta, the fire, and things are starting over again. Lughnasad is a bit the other way around, like we're still full in the summer, but things are starting to go darker and more inwards, and I guess that's the reason why we start to do the bonfires again in the night, especially because the night comes and we still try to color it with the color of the sun, which is the fire. So if you organize a bonfire for your coven, do let me know for Lughnasad, and if you are in South Wales, I wouldn't mind joining. I hope this was useful, interesting, fun, and until the next video, I really hope that we can hex the patriarchy together, because there's need for it.